hours, 4.5 hours of telly last night, wasn't it? James and Rupert Murdoch facing that grilling. What have the British papers made of it?
Let's start with The Independent. Now, they lead on hacking crisis edges closer to Cameron. This is, of course, two of the main actual facts that came out of yesterday that they headline on. Firstly, the fact that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff encouraged police not to brief him about phone hacking. And secondly, the fact that Neil Wallace, former News of the World deputy editor who has been arrested for involvement in phone hacking, gave the Conservative Party advice before the last general election. So Independent says that makes things more and more uncomfortable for Cameron. They've got another interesting thing on their front page, which I must say was the main soundbite that I took away from yesterday as well. Here at the top, question from Tom Watson MP: do you accept that ultimately you are responsible for this fiasco? And Rupert Murdoch's answer: no, which they say was the most shocking thing that came out of this, that he doesn't consider himself responsible. Their editorial is headlined, "This was a day of evasion, not humility." He, of course, stressed his humility over and over again, but they say he didn't seem humble. He even laughed at some of the questions, sort of, and didn't seem to want to answer them very fully. They say he almost held the Parliamentary Committee in contempt, Rupert Murdoch, yesterday, according to The Independent, especially on the subject of those internal emails at News International that seem to have disappeared in 2007, or were at least maybe hidden by the lawyers, which seemed to show that senior executives knew about phone hacking at least as late as 2007. They say the answers on that subject especially were not adequate, and they will have to be questioned again, according to The Independent.
Quite harsh words from The Independent there.
Yes, it's the pie story, which is in most of the other headlines, because, of course, it gives a fairly obvious headline. Murdoch's humble pie is in The Guardian. Daily Telegraph, virtually the same. Murdoch eats humble pie. Obviously too good a pun for the papers to avoid. But as The Guardian points out, we shouldn't let the man who came in and threw a shaving foam pie at Rupert Murdoch overshadow the media coverage of what was actually said in those hearings. The Guardian has an assortment of interesting analysis inside. Their economist Henry Porter says power has rarely been stripped so publicly and with such lethal formality. Both Murdochs, he says, seemed greatly diminished. The paper also says Rebekah Brooks' testimony that she didn't inquire as to where certain stories came from, and she wasn't responsible for paying private investigators, so how could she know who her paper paid, doesn't hold water at all. They say she talked a lot about trust, but a tabloid newsroom isn't built on trust, and Rebekah Brooks got to where she is by not trusting anyone. The Guardian says they also point out Rupert Murdoch is famous for micromanaging his newspapers, so even if the News of the World only represents, as he said, 1% perhaps of the profits of News International, it's very hard to believe that he speaks to the editor as infrequently as he claims to. The Guardian says only he didn't know, as he said, who the News of the World chief reporter was even. The Guardian also focuses quite a lot on the testimony given by the former police commissioner John Yates yesterday, which did get overshadowed a little bit by the Murdochs themselves, but he came out with more concrete facts. He said, we quit, meaning himself and the other commissioner, Sir Paul Stevenson, and more people at News International need to. They say the company deliberately tried to thwart the criminal investigation in 2005 and 2006. That was Yates's testimony yesterday, and it's also what Parliament's Home Affairs Committee, which was talking to Yates yesterday, is going to say in a report set to be revealed later today. He said they hid the file of emails showing top executives were aware of phone hacking. They paid the legal fees of those jailed in 2006, Clive Goodman and Glenn Mulcair. Rebekah Brooks did actually admit this yesterday after the Murdochs had denied knowing anything about it. The Guardian points out, and they say that's the real smoking gun of what came out of yesterday.
And what about the Murdoch papers? What are they saying? Because it's difficult for them, isn't it?
It is a little bit. Well, shaving foam pie guy gave them a little bit of an easy headline, didn't they? The Sun is able to devote lots of column inches today on a history of custard pie throwing in British politics. But in some of his other papers, the Times headlines on Murdoch's defence. The Wall Street Journal, though, which defended him very strongly, you might remember 2 days ago in a strongly worded editorial, is a bit less keen today. They say Rupert Murdoch deflects blame, saying that he came across as not being very on top of what goes on within his own company. He was halting, he didn't answer very fully, and that, the paper said, is what the shareholders will be thinking today, among the increasing rumours that he doesn't seem really competent and in charge of what's going on within his own company, and he could be replaced.
All right, that's Elena then with a look through the international papers. Really, a look through the British papers today, but who can blame her on a day like today?